Hi, I'm Carolyn and I'm a hub artist. I do abstract, collage, and mixed media work, and I also do realistic pastel with watercolor underpainting. Today I'm going to talk to you about my collage work and how I do it. I often say that I am a joyous painter. If I'm upset or if things are bothering me, I take myself to the garden, put my hands in the earth, and Mother Nature takes the angst from me. Needless to say, right now, I have beautiful gardens. Nature is what motivates my work. So in my collage work, I try and celebrate nature and celebrate life. I use several things when I do my collages. Early on when I started, I used to buy materials and I found that over time they faded. So when you buy commercial materials to work on something like altered books or trading cards or do collage, you have to be careful that when you buy it, it doesn't fade. Since that happened, I learned to dye paper. I dye all my own paper, and I embellish my own paper and make my own embellishments for the collages. Some of the papers that I dye are tissue paper, and I like that because it is transparent, and when you can see through it, you can do a lot of layers in your collage, and you can see when you paint it, the beautiful runs you get, which look a lot like things you would see in nature, like your rock formations or the way the earth or sand pulls away from a dune. So I like doing the tissue paper and I like the runs that that makes. Another type of paper that I dye is deli paper, and I like that because it has a little wax in it and it puddles. And those puddles give you very interesting shapes to work with, different runs. I also dye, for a more solid and more opaque look, rice paper. So the rice paper takes the paint differently. In fact, every paper you use will take the paint differently. I also buy some commercial decorative papers that I dye. And these I always buy in a neutral color or white so I can get the color that I want. Now, I'd like to say something about being an artist in general. You really need to know your color theory. And one of the things that's really important is to have a piece of work that harmonizes. And one way to do that is to learn to mix colors. Now, in all of my art, I basically use 3 colors and a dark and a light. Every paint manufacturer's paint is different, so you have to find 3 primaries you like to work with and learn to mix them. I have a blue, a red, and a yellow. And with that and a dark and light, I can make just about any color. And in that way, I can interchange what I'm doing and it always harmonizes. I'm going to demonstrate to you here how I dye the tissue paper, how I dye the deli paper, and the decorative papers. What I do is I water down my paint so it's, you know, sort of like soup. And going in one direction, I pull the paint across my tissue paper. And the more rips, bubbles, and wrinkles you get, the more beautiful the paper is going to be in the end. And I usually always work on a white plastic bag because when it dries, it just pops off. Now, as you're doing this, you can start to mix your colors. So I get some oranges. See, I see a beautiful spot coming here, so I'm just going to sort of let the paint run. So I get these beautiful little loops in here that I can use in something. I try not to get any lines or streaks, and that comes from watering down your paint enough. Now I may add just a little blue to this so I can get some purple. Now when I have a wrinkle like this, I'm going to make those lines that I showed you in the other paper. I'm not going to go to the edge because I really don't want to get paint on the floor here. Now, the deli paper, you're going to see, takes the paint a little differently. Oops. I accidentally mixed some green here when I put my blue paintbrush in. So, oh, that's made a lovely neutral yellow, which will be lovely. And I will mix a little. When you mix your three primaries together, you get this lovely brown. And since I do a lot of earth-related things, I like neutral colors. But you can see the difference here. Since this has a little wax in it, it puddles, and since this doesn't, you have the bubbles and the runs. Now, I don't know what kind of, oh, I need a nice green here. Another thing I do is when I'm done painting, if I'm just painting an abstract, I take what's left over on my palette and I dye some paper with it, and that way I'm never wasting any paint. It's another reason I like collage, because you recycle a lot of things. You can use your tissue paper from gifts. You need a little more water here. Another thing I really like to use, and it pulls a lot of things together, because when you're done, you have a lot of integrating to do of all these pieces, is to dye gauze or bandage that you can get at Walgreens. And then you can pull it apart and you have all these wonderful threads you can use. So again, I do this on plastic because when it dries, it just pops off. I'm making an interesting pattern over here as I'm dripping my paint. And sometimes those happy accidents are the best thing to use. I'm going to use up some of this. To get an earthy tone to it. The second thing I use in my collages is something called embellished paper. And I started this one yesterday, so I wouldn't have to do too much. But you can embellish almost anything. Paper bags, wrapping paper, copy paper, cardstock, old paintings that have failed. So I used my roller and I rolled in 2 colors, and then I did a little graffiti with a pencil and a marker. And now I am going to add some stamps. Now that's something else I do. I make my own stamps and I make them. So what I do is I'm going to stamp on top of this, I'm going to stencil on top of this, I'm going to roll some more paint. And I believe everything should be mine, so I make my own stamps, and I do this by taking a bottom of a meat or vegetable container, the styrofoam, and cutting it, and with a pencil drawing in what I want so it leaves an indentation. And the other way I do it is by taking the meat container or vegetable container bottom and buying fun foam. And you can buy fun foam that has a coating on the back so it sticks. And you can cut out whatever shapes you want. Now this is a foot I have used in a number of collages, and sometimes just a shape or a design. And you do this so it's yours and it's original. So I'm going to do a couple of stamps on top of this. And I said I use my 3 basic colors, red, yellow, and blue, with a dark and a light. And the dark I choose to use is Payne's Gray. And I think Payne's Gray is a nice dark. So I am just going to stamp this over my paper. Maybe something a little more solid. And then I am going to stencil some colors over this. Maybe use a different stencil. And I have no plan in mind here. I am just making a piece of embellished paper. And then I would start all over again. I would roll again, stamp again, stencil again. And when you're finished, you have papers that look like this. Now this one I did with iridescent paint, and I had torn off pieces to use. And this is another piece that I have used half of, and I have not used this one yet in anything. But when you make your embellished paper, you want to use it, or I want to use it, against a solid, because then it starts to show off. If you put your embellished paper against a solid, you can start to see value changes, which are very important, and pair things up. And if you're going to make a solid, you want to put just a little bit of gesso in your paint, not a lot to change the color, but then it makes a nice solid. I use a lot of the neutral solids for my collages. So I will take the one I just started home and put a couple more layers on it. So it has this rich underneath feel to it, and it's very interesting. Another thing that I do, make a lot of handmade paper, and I don't go out and I pick leaves, and I don't go through the whole process of making very good paper. And I wish I had the time to do that and the know-how. But what I do is I use recycled paper that's gone through the shredder, and I add a little binder to it, and then I do use some natural dyes, like this is spinach juice in this one, from boiled off spinach, and this is from beets, and this has some weeds in it, and this is coffee grounds. And these I incorporate with my embellished paper, and I may put it on a dyed paper. So I start to build layers, and building layers gives a painting history, and it gives it a feeling. Another thing that I use is I make complicated paper. Now, complicated paper is taking lots of scraps from your table, or when you're doing something, like there are threads in here and there are little pieces of paper. When I'm done working on something, I take all the scraps from my work table, and I take my scissor and I chop them up into little pieces like this. And what I'm doing is I'm forming another piece of paper out of all of these scraps, and you call it complicated paper. Now, last year I was cleaning out some Christmas cards, and I thought, what could I do? But I just loved all the colors in it, so I chopped them up with the scissor and the paper cutter, and then I put them together to make new paper. And I had made a blue sheet, and this is what's left of my blue sheet. And then I made one with just what was left on my table. And I love rust. I do a lot of collages where I find rusty pieces and put them in. And this I made out of a bunch of rust that had fallen apart at the bottom of my bag. I had saved some pieces, and after time it just sort of crumbled, and I didn't want to throw it away. So I put down some Elmer's glue. That's a bit much. We'll spread it out. And again, you work on plastic. And when it's done, then it just pops off, and you have this other sheet of paper. So I'm going to take a pile of stuff that I have here, my tweezers, and I'm going to lay it into my Elmer's glue. And Elmer's and medium, you could use either one, dries clear. So if you leave some spaces, like in this one, you can see whatever you put it on, you can see through, or you can weave things through. But what you're doing is you're out of old paper, you're making new paper. And when I started doing this, I made sheets in colors, like a blue sheet, a red sheet, a yellow sheet, green sheet. Now I just sort of make any color because inevitably in the process of integrating them, I do color them. But I love the texture and I love the things that come out from underneath. Let me just add a little more glue here. And place your papers in. And you can make small pieces or large pieces. In the end, you rip them up and tear little corners out to use. I have some fabric in here and some thread, some wool. And when I use glue on my brush, I make sure I have a container of Murphy's oil soap and water to put it in, because that will keep your brush from hardening and you can continue to use it. When I use natural fibers that I find outside, you have to make sure that you dry them. So I place them between a few sheets of paper towels with some books on top or a brick or something. And you let them dry for a few days. Then I coat them with either medium, which is a polymer type product, or if it's something heavy like this is, I might use the soft gel medium, or you can use varnish, or you could use polyurethane. When I do a collage and I'm finished with it, even though I have painted my own paper, dyed it and embellished it myself, I always coat it with a varnish with a UVH in it. And then when it's dry, I put a couple of coats of polyurethane on. And I do that because I use a lot of pieces, and many times I embellish them and I want them to hold together over time. If someone's going to purchase something, I want it to be a quality product and I want it to last. So I make sure I use the best of paint and high quality glue, and I make sure that I coat it so it will be well preserved. Let me show you here how I've used some of the pieces. Okay, this is a rather simple collage, and up here I have used the dyed tissue paper, and down here I have used the dyed tissue paper. Through this area here, I tore up a piece of the embellished paper. You can see in this section that this is the embellished paper. And in this section here, I used a small piece of the complicated paper. Now to pull it together, I used a stamp and I tried to get the colors to coordinate, so I had this land-shape type collage. In this collage, I've used a natural fiber from a palm tree and stone, but the background was the dyed tissue paper that we did and some dyed decorative paper, and then I have added to that some handmade paper and the fiber from the palm tree and a stone for embellishment. This was a very recent one, and the back of this is a piece of fibrous material. And you can see different things that I have used on this. I have the dye decorative paper, some of the fibrous material. I have the crazy paper in this area and the crazy paper in this area. And I have used the dyed gauze on the corner and embellish it again with a natural element of stone. In this collage of the canyon, I have handmade paper is the light area. And you can see in this purple brown section, this is the dyed tissue paper, and you can see as you layer it, you get some dark areas and you get some light areas. And then I have the fibrous threads running down through the canyon, and I have accented areas of it with the crazy paper or the complicated paper. This too is a fiber collage, which I recently finished, and its underbelly here, where the understructure is made out of the dyed tissue paper on both ends, and across it I have the decorative paper which has been dyed, and I embellished it with yarn and some beads off of an old blouse. I've been experimenting during my shutdown here, when I'm not in the garden, with monoprinting. So this is a monoprint, and I've added to the monoprint some handmade paper, some fiber from the Cape myrtle tree, and then a piece of bark from the palm, along with some Indian beads. So it's been fun working with something new like monoprinting. If you're going to do collage and start collage, the one thing that you really need to do is you need to build a supply of materials. So you need to take a couple of weeks to dye paper, embellish paper, get all the things that you're going to use and need together, because there's nothing worse than getting in the middle of something and finding, oh, I don't have the color I need. And you stop and you make something and you go back and you don't remember where you were or where you were going with the project. It's an art that takes a lot of space. You need to have a lot of supplies, and they have to be on hand because you just can't start and stop. And one of the ways I work is I'll walk around my studio. When I find things that go together, I dye a piece of paper and I think, oh, I have a piece of bark that goes with this, or I have another dyed piece of paper. And I put them together and I put them in a bag. So I know these things will work well together. So when I want to go into my studio and work, I can look and say, oh, I think I'll work on this today. And I have together all the supplies that I'm going to need. Now, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't have a plan in my head, but I do have colors that relate to each other, and I have different textures that I want to work with, and I put those together. And I may have to find some more things, but again, because I only deal with 3 colors and a dark and a light, almost everything I have harmonizes with the other thing. So it's easy for me to work that way. I hope you will come see my work at the Hub. I am in the main gallery. I teach classes here. I have a class called Explore Your Creativity that the students work in all different areas, and we share new ideas that we come up with, and we share our opinions and our feelings about our work, and it's an exciting group of people. Thank you for joining me today. I appreciate your time. Carolyn Land, Hub Artist.